Hey guys, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Madison Mountain View. Today, our special guest is Victor Saad, founder of the Experience Institute. So, Victor, if you could take a moment and introduce yourself, tell us a little bit more about how you founded Experience Institute.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Victor, and a couple of years ago, I was working with middle school and high school students in the west suburbs of Chicago, and decided that I was kind of really interested in this world of for-profit and for-purpose businesses, wanting to figure out how to scale good ideas that serve people, but also in a way that's sustainable. So MBAs were an option, very expensive option, and decided that maybe that was outside of the realm of possibility for me anyway. So designed my own education through 12 experiences in 12 months around the world. I called it the Leap Year Project, wrote a blog and a newsletter, and sourced really cool experiences from CEOs, creative directors, all kinds of people who were just opening their doors to a kid who was designing his education. They thought it was interesting, and I wanted to find a small project to be helpful. Anyway, it created a really interesting community of people that launched also a book project around taking risks to learn and a TED Talk and all this magic. And by the end of all of that, we realized that there's an opportunity to possibly kind of provoke higher education by starting a school of our own where people design their education through experience. So Experience Institute was birthed out of that, and now students design their education through three-month experiences, and those range from 10 to 12-week apprenticeships all the way down to just personal projects where students dive in to something they're really passionate about with the structure of EI and the community of EI. There are classes every quarter and coaching every week to make sure that it feels like a school. There is some delivery of content and all that. So it's kind of a mix between Harvard and the Amazing Race. Is kind of how we put it together.
What a great mashup, Harvard and the Amazing Race. I love it. You know, I mean, it's funny because it takes me all the way back to one of the first seasons of The Apprentice, good old Donald Trump. And he
Right.
put two teams together, and one team was book smarts and the other one was street smarts. And that's always been the age-old debate in terms of the learning by doing, the actual practical experience, the school of hard knocks, if you will, versus the academic approach. And for me personally, it's always been. I'll tell you two things that are interesting. One is I feel like I've always been a book smarts guy, an academic guy. I've always enjoyed the shell and the safety net of going through an institution. When I came to this country 18 years ago, I applied to do an MBA, and I never actually got in. And I had to figure it out really quickly to get a job. Otherwise, I would have been back in South Africa. So I've almost done a whole 180 from being in the school of book smarts to street smarts. I guess the question becomes, do we even need an MBA? Have MBAs themselves become completely redundant?
Mm. Yeah, I don't know. I've never been one to. I've been really cautious to totally throw everything out around master's programs or MBAs specifically. I think they have a place. There are individuals who really value the environment of an MBA program, having professors, having classes, having a campus and so on in a more traditional form. So is it redundant? That's a good question. I think it needs to evolve, or maybe even just kind of go back to the drawing board and restart a little bit. But institutions move so slowly that I don't think it'll happen overnight. So my thought was less about how do we just throw it all out, and more about what else should we create? What other seeds should we plant so that there is new life in higher
Right.
education, rather than cutting down all the other trees there.
Right. It's almost this idea of how does it evolve, not unlike organizations or brands or institutions or not
Yeah.
for NGOs or whatever the case may be. And what's interesting is I think it's a very meta approach, because what you've done is you've taken an entrepreneurial approach and an innovative approach to this subject but on another level, part of the reason why I'm even challenging on this front is because you know, it is so easy today, or so much easier today, to start a business, to be an entrepreneur, just to, you know, to just do it, so to speak, in terms of having to go through this formalized, and part of the, you know, part of the whole allure of an MBA is that it's less about the content and more about this rite of passage and this alumni, this, you know, the access that suddenly someone is granted by going through these gates and getting, you know, almost this vetting in a sense that allows them to pass to the next level and get opportunities. So I think what you're doing is incredible, and ultimately finding this balance, right, between the book smarts and the street smarts.
Yeah, yeah, and that's an interesting dichotomy. I don't know where I put myself. I had to study really hard to get good grades, and I didn't mind it, but it didn't come naturally to me. And I was graduated with honors and so on. And then on the street side of thing, you know, I wasn't. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm, you know, I'm winsome or I'm kind, I'm whatever, these things like that help on the street smarts. But I mean, I know people who everything they touch turns to gold. You know, they just figure out, like, they think of an idea and then, you know, a month later they have $1 million. Like, and I'm not that guy either, right? So I don't know where I sit there, and I think that's the magic of it. Is that, you know, some people are stronger on one. It's more of a gradient than it is a here or there. But I totally agree with you that bringing people together and those kinds of people, a diverse set of people in the same space, and making sure there's spaces that invite that, as opposed to knocking out people who aren't necessarily book smart because they didn't get good test grades.
But do we think that MBAs actually meet that purpose? Like what you talk about, I think is really important. The idea of diversity, right? The type of people who go and get an MBA generally come from socioeconomic background and a similar sort of outlook on the world that places a value on those things. So when they go into an MBA program, they're not going into a program where they're really gaining any sort of experience in terms of diversity with the people that they're getting an MBA with. It's more, well, we all had, you know, a couple years in business, we all have similar goals, we all have a similar outlook, and now we're all going to follow this similar path. At least I've always seen it as a very and sort of almost closed off you know, tool that some people seek out.
Yeah, I wonder about it too. I mean, if I was in a position of trying to, you know, if my bottom line, you know, was dependent on farming out a certain kind of individual that was going to go into a certain kind of profession, and farming is not the right word, but you know what I'm saying, helping to develop these certain kinds of individuals.
Yeah.
Then yeah, I think it could be easy to think that, or I could see myself falling into the mindset that I have to create this kind of environment where these people fit, and they're instructed by these kinds of people, and then, you know, they go through, they kind of process through. And so once again, like, I think I'm now, because I'm small, I mean, brand new, tiny, I can go back to the drawing board a bit and just think about the entire repositioning, that instead of me guiding these people perfectly through, you know, to a certain outcome of a X, Y, or Z kind of individual, how do I offer tools in a community where people can now start making their education or designing their education? And then that invites all kinds of diversity. Just like there are different styles of furniture makers, or different styles of website designers, or different styles of chefs. But yeah, chefs can all work together and have that same conversation, furniture maker, and so on. How do we create that sense of, I don't know, maker, you know, mindset within education? Not like teaching making, but like making your education, designing it. And I think that invites diversity in a new way that I don't know yet how universities adapt to that or create that environment. I'm not sure, but I think some are for sure. But yeah.
And just to for my own knowledge, is the Experience Institute only higher education? Is it to take the place of a standard four-year university? What kind of level of education are you offering and targeting?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I think we're working to define our user base. The sweet spot so far has been right after college, like through your kind of post first job kind of thing. So that 22, 23 to 27, 20. That's been the majority of our students. On one end, we're just about to have our first high school graduate finish the program.
Ah,
An awesome 18-year-old who wanted to take a gap year of sorts and didn't like the idea of gap, right? So like Experience Institute and Leap Year and just felt more active and had more of a structure for him. And he nailed it. I mean, it was awesome. And then on the other end, we had a 39-year-old who's just about to finish the program, so career shifter. But like I said, sweet spot, I think, is probably 20.
very cool. And what what is the role of entrepreneurship versus big corporations? So I see that you offer apprenticeships and you're kind of getting ready, it sounds like you're helping people find the right environment at big organizations for them, but at the same time, everything you do sounds very entrepreneurial. So what is the balance between makers who start something versus makers and people who want to go work for big organizations that they admire?
Yeah, so there are definite pros and cons to one. On the, when we put a student, not when we put, but when a student in a smaller, entrepreneurial venture connect, it's really special because the student's seeing the inner workings. It's like walking onto a construction site, being shown the blueprints and saying, okay, like how do you see yourself helping to build this house, or whatever. That's a remarkable experience. On the other hand, to walk into a beautifully polished company and to sit with the people who helped build the building, sometimes literally, but more so figuratively, right? And to learn with them and to see something that's been done well. And if someone in that size of a corporation is willing to spend time with a learner, I think the benefit to them becomes that they learn how to frame their learnings in a new way, and also they're seeding great talent. I mean, if this is someday might be a great way to bring on the next kind of generation of leadership into a company.
Well, I actually think, to that point, this idea of internships, internships have always been thought of as entry level. Liz began with us, as an intern and ended up staying with us. But on another level, this idea of reinventing internships at a more senior level, shorter term, more intensive learning by doing hands-on approach is fantastic. And, again, if you look at the old world, the old school approach of life as in a company, the gold Rolex upon retirement, but also the third part of that, the third pillar, was this ability that your company would pay for you to do an MBA. And there were executive MBAs, and it would take longer and, again, more theoretical and academic. And what I think this could do as well is provide more of an incentive to attract and retain talent, in particular younger talent. So it works on both levels. One is from a talent retention standpoint, but also this idea, and we feel very strongly about this at Evolution, about this ability that the only way to understand change is to live it and experience it. And for these, mid-level and even senior brand managers, they're kind of reading about all this disruptive change, but they're not actually getting their hands dirty, whether it's learning to code or whether it's downloading an app or whether it's doing office hours at a shared workspace. These tasks become part of the curriculum, and I think that's why this fusion that you've put together makes so much sense.
Yeah, and I'm curious as we continue to see the workforce change so much, as people, obviously it's nothing novel that people aren't staying at companies as long, and companies are getting rid of staff and working more with contractors or teams of contractors, which is kind of a new kind of thing. And big corporations and small companies alike are working that way. One of the things that would be interesting to explore for, I think, larger corporations is offering a new vernacular of designing kind of, I wouldn't use the word sabbatical, but a season of learning, whether that's kind of we use the word leap a lot because it's active and it, trying to get to something kind of audacious of sort. But how do, if I'm a manager or the director of a larger company, how do I keep my staff curious? How do I keep them imaginative? And I don't want to just send them to MBA programs, and I don't want to just send them on long vacation. How do I create that culture of curiosity in my company? Because that's what's going to keep me relevant. Now, same thing on the entrepreneurial side, moving so fast, trying to build. How do you create just enough of a spark to remember, oh yeah, what am I learning? How am I, as I make this? What's the story we want to tell on as we learn how to build this? So I mean, from a specifically with the business side, Gina, just to go back to your comment about how does this serve small companies or big companies, I think the talent piece is important. I think having a learner at the table in both contexts is really beneficial to the student and to the company for that sake of curiosity. But on a larger scale, trying to expand what learning means, outside of just 18 to 22 or outside of just the context of an institution. Yeah.
Absolutely. Very inspirational way for us to start our morning.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Victor, for joining us. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but everybody go check out Experience Institute. It's expinstitute.com, right, Victor?
Yep, nailed it.
Awesome. Very cool. So thank you again so much, and join us next week.
Yeah.
Bye.